Okie dokie. I'm ready.
Hi there. Here we are, Gords Poetry Show number 87 in early October in Oakville at home here. And I'm talking today with Karl Jirgens, the legendary editor and progenitor of Rampike Quarterly, which has had a long and productive life and is still talked about all over the place these days. And if you're young and don't know about this, I imagine all the gray-haired oldsters like ourselves will know about it. It was a very prominent journal in its day, something that almost everybody wanted to get in, I can imagine. And but for younger folks who may not have known of this since its untimely demise, here you are with the man who started it and kept it going for, what, 20 years or almost 20
Oh, yeah, well, it ran from 1979 to 2016, so around 36 years.
I'm way out, 36 years. And for a literary magazine, that's almost unheard of.
If you want to do the math, I don't know.
That's got to be unheard of, Carl. How many others went on that long?
Some of them have gone 40 years.
Yeah? Fiddlehead, maybe?
Some of the Fiddlehead's older.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's the long...
I remember there was one called Quarry magazine out of Kingston. They did a pretty good job. But
they did, yeah.
When they, some of them hit 50, and so it's rare that they last much longer than that.
Yes.
But if you want to talk about Rampike, that's fine.
Sure.
I was going to call it Rumpike after a while, just because it was just a pain in the butt to make.
Yes.
And I had to. Every year I had to submit my tax reports, and I had to do. Grant applications and stuff like that. So it's just a big grind.
Yes.
And although it's one of the ways that the grassroots of Canadian Lit keeps cooking.
Sure.
And so I was really happy to be able to contribute to that. And so if I can hold up this flyer.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's a flyer that Karl has left over from his conference on the weekend. Yes?
Well,
no?
Not just that. This is one that I've prepared because, not only is it part of the conference that I took part in, it was an academic conference at University of Toronto.
Yes.
About the history of Toronto culture.
Yes.
But I was there just talking about stuff, and Rampike came up, and I gave away a few copies. Unfortunately, I gave away all the copies because people were interested in them.
You're too generous.
Anyway, but the neat thing about Rampike now is it's got free public access. So if you want to look it up, you can get access just by saying about Rampike on Google, and it will take you to the university portal. And then you just press the university portal and you're in, and it's free and it's searchable. And there's a big archive of over 4,000 pages, colored covers, and the guts are mostly black and white. Not much color in there. Although I sometimes injected some color after we went digital. You could restore the color, but most of it is just black and white. And I wanted to stress that the copyrights still belong to the contributors, so there was never a copyright issue. If anybody wants to reproduce something, they have to talk to the artist. And sometimes I can put you in touch with them. But the mag did really well. The contributors to Rampike won major literary prizes such as the Booker, the Commonwealth, the Orange Prize, the Pulitzer, the Dublin Impact, the Neustadt Prize, the Giller, the Trillium, the Writers' Trust, the Governor General's Award, to name just a few of them. And so I was really pleased to be able to get that quality of author and writer. It wasn't just writers that we published artists, and theorists as well as writers. So a lot of really interesting artists were in it too, and playwrights. And so I did interviews and stuff like that. So it was a really interesting experience.
And I can certainly vouch for the high quality and depth of this archive. I've been looking at it for the last couple of weeks, and it's just endless. It's like wandering into a great library. It really is.
Yeah, it's pretty
remarkable.
It was put together by the Leddy Library at the University of Windsor, and I owe a debt of thanks to a couple of people, Heidi Jacobs and a fellow by the name of Johnson, and they worked very hard, and I give credit to everybody at the opening page for the online magazine. But well, a magazine is something that everybody in the community, the literary community, contributes to, or the arts community, or the theory community. And so, like, I had good luck getting some really prominent names such as Jacques Derrida and Julia Kristeva and others, and David Foster Wallace. I was really happy about, and so we got lucky. It took me about 5 years to get it up to an international level, where it was recognized in other countries, and so I did it. I did a lot of travel initially. I traveled from Toronto, where I was based at the time, to places in Europe, and to New York City and Chicago and other places like that. And I lined up distributors who were interested in taking it. I went to Paris, France, and showed the copies of it there, and luckily the people were receptive. They said, okay, we would like to sell this, and so I kept mailing it over there, and it worked out okay. I was kind of happy about that.
So you'd mail a certain number of copies every quarter to various European countries? Oh
yes, the distribution network stretched from Europe to North America, all over Canada, straight down the rim. I guess I forget where it is, but there's a network in the United States that covers places like New York City, Chicago, then straight south to California, places like New Orleans and so on, San Francisco. So it really got wide circulation. It even made the Pacific Rim, so like places like Japan, Australia, and so on. So I was really happy about that.
I bet.
It took a long time to get it out there.
Yeah.
I remember Steve McCaffrey used to thank me for taking the postmortem out of postmodern.
Good line.
Yeah.
Good line.
He was a clever guy, and he contributed to it a bunch of times, and so did B.P. Nichol, and a whole bunch of other really good writers I was very happy with. And I spent a lot of time getting Indigenous authors.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yeah, and so like we featured people like Thompson Highway and members of the LGBTQ plus two-spirited groups, people like Robert Mapplethorpe and so on. Like Joel Peter Whitkin. They were doing erotic photography, and so we put some of their stuff in the erotics issue. Each issue had a different theme.
Yes.
So if you're perusing the archive, you'll see that each issue is titled after a different heading. So some of the headings included wood, because wood was obvious because magazines are made out of paper, which is made out of wood, and so I thought, okay, well that's a loop right there.
Yes.
And then I had a violence issue and an erotics issue and stuff like that. I remember for the violence issue, I got a hold of the premier of Quebec at the time, René Lévesque.
Yes.
And he was kind of keen on appearing in the magazine, but he said, well, I don't have much to say about violence. We're anti-violent over here. and so I said, okay, but can you say something about what your attitudes are? And he was happy to provide me a letter with an official sort of crest logo on it, from the ministry office of the government of Quebec and so on. Yeah, so we had I had a lot of fun with the mag over the years, and each year was a different kind of category, and but as I say, the grant applications were onerous, and the tax situation was always a problem. And in the end, little magazines tend not to make much money.
Of course.
And so, like,
labor of love.
I was coughing up dough just to keep it running, and
right,
which was kind of a nuisance. But
yeah,
well, you do what you do.
Exactly. The arts are not. It's not banking. It's not insurance.
No.
It's not investment. It's
you don't
arts.
get financial rewards much.
No,
it's still okay though. But there's a kind of a capital to culture.
Yes.
Which I was happy to share with the general public, and now it's archived, so it continues to be free, and people can refer it. So I the way I look at the archive, it's like a historical archive.
Yes, it is,
because it provides a slice of life from 1979, through the 80s, the 90s, and into the 2000s.
Absolutely.
So you get to see like a big hunk of creative life from that period, and it kind of speaks for itself in many ways, and I was pretty happy about that. I had many artists from around the world, and people like Chris Burden and Dennis Oppenheim and Louise Nevelson, and sculptors and painters, and often performance artists too. I was really interested in performance art, but the indigenous element was always part of the magazine. So like I did a lot to try to support indigenous culture, and in fact there was a special issue devoted just to indigenous writing. It was edited by Catariaca Wenzi Dam, and a great issue, I thought. And another issue was dedicated to the anniversary of the city of Quebec. I think it was the 400th anniversary.
Interesting theme.
And it was all in French. So it wasn't a big seller in Anglo-Canada,
no.
but in Quebec it sold quite well. So yeah, you do peculiarities like that. And,
yes.
And it appeals to certain groups who want to do the research and would like to know more about, that aspect of our culture.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, I think it's great that it had such an international cast and scope, because a lot of Canadian literary magazines never got to that level.
Well, I bent the rules a little bit. The Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council always had rules about how far you're allowed to feature international talent. And I would bend the rules slightly. We were allowed about 10%, and I would always push it to about 12 or 15%.
I see.
It was so I was getting people from India, South America, Italy, Europe, Germany, France, and Denmark, and so on, Japan, all around the world. Australia, I had a few Australian regulars.
Yes,
and so as a result, it became a kind of diplomatic cultural liaison between Canada and other parts of the world, and it picked up a large international clientele. I think partly because of the sales in places like Paris and London and other major European cities. It was in Germany. It was in. I remember visiting Joseph Beuys in Dusseldorf.
Yes.
And I just cold called him on the. They had public payphones at the time, and I just called him up. I just happened to have his phone number.
Yes.
And I called him up and I said, "Hey," in my broken German, I said, "I'm a journalist from Canada. Would you be willing to talk to me for a little while?" And he said, "Okay." He was really nice. And the thing I found was the more important the person was, the friendlier they tended to be, because they would just talk to you. And so I was really happy about that. And he made me a coffee, and he brought me into his studio, and he even posed with a cover of the magazine as if he was reading it, even though I know he only saw it the first time. And I foolishly did a head and shoulders photo of just his head and shoulders, because I was going to publish the interview that I was doing with him in the magazine.
Yes.
and he was posing with the mag in his hands like this.
Yes.
So that I could take a picture of him reading.
Yes.
And I stupidly didn't do that because I was young and foolish at the time. And what a mistake that was.
We've all been there.
So I would have had a famous artist posing for like what would have been an advertising shot. But it was really interesting talking to people like Joseph Beuys, because he would say things like, "So do you know Andy Warhol?" And I'd go, "Yeah, I'm sure. Everybody's heard of Andy Warhol. I know of him. Yeah." And he'd go, "Well, next time you're in New York City, say hi to him from me, okay?" And I went, "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?" So I never did get down to New York City to talk to Andy Warhol, but it was interesting. The doors like that opened up, and I was allowed to meet people like that, and so it was kind of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, that's one thing I remember from the early days, 70s particularly, was this insularity about Canadian literature. And I was so happy when we broke out of that when would that happen? 80s, 90s, and became not only winning international prizes and recognition, but sort of getting over our fear that if we let Canadian literature move into the world, that it would somehow get lost.
Yeah.
Which I sensed greatly in the 70s, but it was a birthing period, of course. But the adolescent period and the adult period, which we're seeing now, is to me marvelous. And you're a big part of that, because you did the spade work, a lot of it.
Yeah,
well,
it was nice to open up that world to a lot of other people, and I noticed that folks, particularly in the United States, started reading Canadian stuff more and more, and they realized all of a sudden that we've got a whole cultural world up here that is not part of the United States proper, but is still highly energetic and highly creative, and so it opened up a lot of diplomatic channels for culture, and so I was really happy about that. But also for Europe, and a lot of Europeans started sending me stuff, and and interestingly enough, from Japan and other countries too. So it was kind of cool to give a kickstart to that kind of thing. And towards the end, I was getting stuff from places like India.
Cool.
Like I didn't know these people, and they somehow found out about the mag.
Yes.
And they sent me stuff, and I went, "Oh wow, this is really brilliant," and it was really exciting to be able to give voice to those kinds of writers, because they couldn't get voices in their own countries or venues in their own countries. So I was able to provide that, and it was really fun to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I bet it was. And I have a couple of little comments. This when we'll get to talking about Karl's new book of stories, The Razor's Edge, in a few moments. But I'm reviewing it for the online mag journal Word City.
Thank you for that.
I've been reviewing for them for a while, and the editors are all over the place. The book review editor who edits, my copy, lives in Africa.
Oh my gosh!
For example, Darcy, who runs the whole show, used to live in Alberta. Now she lives in Southern Ontario near Grand Bend, and we're all over the place. And Olga Stein asked me to join up. But what's interesting, since I've started doing these reviews, I mean, I talk to artists that I know, like Karl, local people, but I'm getting submissions from Italy, France, Australia, and not only Australia. I'm yet to get the book, but it's a Pakistani woman that lives in Australia. So I mean, how international and how cool is that?
Yeah.
And obviously I can write or email people like Karl, Steve Van Ryd, Gregory Betts, other people that I know, and ask, hey, I'll review your book. But to get somebody from Italy, John Taylor, France, who translates Italian and Belgian and Swiss poets, it's amazing. It's like wonderful. The fulfillment of Canada moving into the international literary scene, at least our small part of it. Well, and I'm quite thrilled to be part of that.
The cosmopolitanism that's evident, I think, is partly enabled by the digital culture.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Like print culture was harder to get out in some ways, but digital is like it's a global village. I used to study with McLuhan,
right?
And so he always talked about how we're only a split second away from Australia. Just if you want to communicate, it's not a problem. So I just went, okay, well, let's just do that. So I'm glad that somebody like you are doing that, and so it's really encouraging.
Well, as I say, I'm responsible for emailing people like yourself and others that I know a little bit, not that well, and they'll go, I'll read my book or whatever. But then when people email from Italy or France or Australia, that's pretty special, because I don't know them, I didn't ask them for anything, and yet the work they submit is very good.
It took me about 5 years to build up to an international cadre with Rampike, but then once it caught on, then it just spread, like everybody would tell everybody else about it, and then it just mushroomed like crazy, and then I guess that's what's happening to you right now, which is it's a very good thing, and it's something that promotes energy at that level, which is cool.
It is. It's very very pleasing, and once again, people like you did the spade work 30 years ago, and I thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And if anybody's watching that don't think I should thank him for that, think again. Well, you're missing an important thing here.
And feel free to peruse the online stuff that's just available for free. Just Google about Rampike and click on the university portal, and you'll get in for free. You don't have to pay anything, and you can just peruse it. There's some pretty bizarre and shocking stuff in there.
There is
also a lot of fun stuff. So I think you might enjoy it, and I think it'll hold up really well historically, because
it will.
The stuff that I selected was, I think, as good as anything that's out there right now, and it's kind of fun. Anyway, so you might like it.
Oh, it absolutely is. I give it my highest recommendation here. It's a fascinating archive, and you have to shut up your computer and go to bed and come back the next day, because there's a lot to look at, and absorb. And the artwork. Let me not forget the artwork.
Yeah, the artwork was good. I had a bunch of artists that did different covers, like Phil Hall just did a recent one. He won the Governor General Award for his poetry for the collection called Killdeer. But he came down to Windsor. There's a Windsor connection there, and we had a bunch of really interesting critics talk about the mag too, like people like Mike Gunderloy, who is out of New York City, Judith Hofberg out of California, Marjorie Perloff, who's one of the heavyweight critics from Stanford University in California, and there were others like Frank Davey and so on that would speak about it. More recently, Michael Bashinsky commented on the ritziness of the publication, and Steve McCaffrey thanked Rampike for moving ahead with unusual stuff that normally wouldn't get light of day, and so we had a strong critical response as well. So that didn't hurt. So I'm very happy about that. But I will say that it was a pain to assemble it, and it's a lot of hard work.
Oh, sure.
And the mag originally used to be only about 6 inches wide. I don't have any tall copies with me, and it was about 18 inches tall.
Yes, I remember that.
and Stan Bevington at Coach House Printing showed me an old copy of the Ants 4-foot, which we borrowed the formatting from a little bit, and just ran with that. And so it was really good, because the mag would stand out behind other publications. Like, for example, I've got a small picture here of the original shape. There it is. And it's just kind of tall like that. And it was narrow like that too. And we'd print, interesting images on it, that one had an image of an eye, so that you could see it looking back at you, kind of.
Yes.
But the neat thing about it was that if I wanted to sell it in bookstores, it would always appear behind other magazines that were listed on the shelf, like there would be.
Yeah.
And it would stick out, And,
I remember that. Yeah, you could always find Rampike. It would be higher than anything else.
But then the big box bookstores wanted us to change the shape because they said, oh, well, we can't stock that. You can't put it sideways. It doesn't fit on the regular shelves that well. And I said, yes, but it sells out every issue. And because it sticks out from behind the other magazines, don't you want to keep it like that? And they said, no, we'd rather you change it to something like the shape of Time magazine. And I went, okay. So we did. We narrowed it a little bit, just in the spirit of keeping it narrow. But that didn't really help. So subscriptions still did really well. But it was a case where the distributors and the sales venues were interfering with the formatting of the publication, and that kind of miffed me.
I bet.
I didn't agree with it because the whole thing was about how the medium is the message. Not only that, but the tall, narrow issues used to fit really neatly on the back of your toilet. And you could read it in the bathroom, and it was like really good reading in the bathroom because each piece was only like a page or two long.
Yes.
And the pages were 6 inches wide and 18 inches tall, so you could read quite a full article. By the time you were done.
I see.
If you were fast, depending on what you were doing in the bathroom. But yeah, so it was okay. Anyhow, so
I never tried that.
Yeah.
But I always appreciated the eccentric shape that it had, and like he says, you could always see it on a magazine shelf. It would be above everything else.
Yeah. So anyhow, well, maybe we've exhausted everything about Rampike, but
it's an important point, and people need to see it in the context of other magazines, which were. Journals rather, which were good to very good, and but it always stood out, always.
Yeah, it did okay. I mean, in its heyday, it was distributed on 5 continents, including North and South America, Europe, Australia, Asia, Japan, the Pacific Rim, South America, and the Middle East and the Far East, including Turkey and India.
Wow.
So it did okay, for a Canadian mag,
Yeah.
bringing news about not only Canadian artists and writers and theorists, but others from around the world.
Yes.
Like people like Jacques Derrida didn't hurt.
Yes, of course.
Because people recognized them, and I would put superstars beside people who were relatively unknown. I'd say, let the readers decide who is the good writer here. And I put prize-winning authors beside someone I thought who was really good but talented and very young and hadn't won any prizes yet.
Yes.
And I would say, yeah, well, okay. But then years later, many of those people that I introduced ended up being prize winners. So it carries really well. It resonates well over time.
Your intuitions were strikingly accurate.
I was lucky, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Well, I'm trying to think of any all literary magazines and quarterlies are in the print days are a labor of love. They're hard work, and anyone would. I'm sure the people that put Quarry together or the New Quarterly or,
well, they provide
any of the
venues,
others would say the same thing. Yes, it's hard work and not much reward, and sometimes we feel like we're,
it's a labor of love,
not getting any response.
Yeah.
I remember when I would buy Canadian Notes and Queries, and they had some issue where I think it's online now. They were complaining about nobody writing in. Or, I'd written in commenting on something, and they said, you're the first person to write in God knows how long. And I had to chuckle because it was pretty much the same at Books in Canada when I was working under Augustine there. Hardly anybody would write in.
I used to write for Books in Canada too. And,
yes.
And for a while, Rampike used to try to feature short mini reviews, like about a paragraph long, on a whole bunch of books that we'd received. So people started sending us books, and I'd say, well, we should review them. And so I got a small team of reviewers on board, and that worked out pretty good too.
Really?
And then we would feature the authors. But I remember there were critical mags like Open Letter magazine that would feature literary commentary edited by Frank Davey, who was one of my mentors, actually.
Right.
And, one of the reasons I decided to start a mag like Rampike in the first place was because I had seen magazines like that. And more recently, I've been publishing in a mag out of the USA called The Typescript, which is a digital mag.
Right, I'm familiar with that. I've seen it online.
It's fun. Yeah, it's like they take chances. I like publications that take risks.
Sure, I get it. Yeah, me too. That's what makes life exciting.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about capsule reviews, I'm intrigued because I tend to rattle on because Word City is digital and there's not really any space problems. But I'm very admiring of the capsule reviews I see in the New Yorker. They fill up half a page, they do 4 books, and everybody gets about 8 or 10 lines. And to me, there's an art to doing that, to convey the essence of a book and get it across in 10 lines. I'd love to be able to do that, and maybe one day I will be able to. Right now I can't. But there's an art to it. I know there is.
Yeah.
And the New Yorker writers are, in my opinion, very good at that.
Highly talented.
So, there's room for all styles and approaches to critical writing, I feel. And I'm certainly a flag waver for the critical approach to Canadian literature. Literature generally, but specifically Canadian, because there's a tendency for us to be a little too nice. And that doesn't do critical culture any good at all. You can't be nice. You can praise and you can blame, but and there's all shades in between. Like I say, I believe criticism is very important. And without it, we don't have a literature. All we have is a bunch of people publishing books, which may be very good books, but you have to have a way to view that and not necessarily put it in order or in order of importance, but just to view it and give it a perspective and a landscape.
That's very true. And I guess one of the things that I always looked for when I was publishing Rampike was how well they integrated the subject matter with the stylistics or the literary structure or the form of the thing.
Yes.
And if they could do both, then they got in. But if they could only do one, say they had really good subject matter but lousy style, or vice versa, they had really good style but boring subject matter, then I would say no. But I think it's the openness that qualifies some Canadian writing and some Canadian publishing.
Yes.
That we're open-minded and we're willing to take a chance on something that maybe people haven't really looked at too carefully or haven't responded to that much in the past. So that was an important part of that too.
It is. Now I'm wondering, we talked about doing a 2-part interview here, the first one on Rampike and the second one on Karl's regular contemporary projects like his new book of stories. And if you're okay with that, we'll take a break now.
Okay, let's do that.
So, end of part 1, and we'll see you soon.